That is Danielle Barbine, the sister to the late Rayshard Brooks. Never easy to do an interview like that. I don't agree with everything she said, but I understand why she's upset. I understand why she's angry. I understand why she's emotional. And she did make some valid points there. Let's think about this for a second. And again, I'm not condoning ever resisting arrest. I don't want to hear it from people. I'm not condoning it. This is a man who was intoxicated. This is a man who was in a scuffle with police, and this was a man who was being tased. You could make the argument, and I'm not condoning what he did, but you could understand, at least I understand where she's coming from. Your first reaction is, I don't want to be tased. I got to grab that taser. Maybe he wasn't really trying to hurt police. Listen, I'm not trying to make excuses for his behavior.
But at that point, he's in a position where he's going to be tased every time.
I understand that.
It's going to take place.
I understand that. But you're a man who's intoxicated. You're not thinking clearly.
I totally get
you're
that.
being, you're afraid. You're scared. We have to take that into consideration as well. And again, I'm not defending his actions.
As far as when he moved his car from the drive-thru to a parking spot, they performed the breathalyzer test after that took
Which
place.
he agreed to do, by the way. He didn't have to agree to do that.
They were not going to take him out of his car and move it for him from a drive-through window. So that's going to be pretty much moot, I believe.
Listen, here's the part where I disagreed with her, and I wanted to be as respectful as I could towards her, and I think I did a good job.
You did a phenomenal job considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I'm trying to. It's a very difficult interview to do, especially when she's giving me some answers that I don't agree with. But I'm trying to be understanding because she's grieving, and
she's innocent.
Yes, she did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Can we please remind people?
Absolutely.
This man's family did absolutely nothing wrong. And by the way, how chilling was that, what she told me about her father, the father to Rayshard Brooks, who said a week ago when George Floyd was buried, gosh, I hope our family never has to go through anything like that. I mean, how chilling was that to hear that? But look, she's grieving, but here's the part where I really disagree with her on. I get it. There are a lot of African Americans out there that are scared. But why pick the moment that you're going to be handcuffed to fight the cops just because you're scared? And I'm not saying she was using as an excuse, but being scared is not an excuse ever to fight police officers, ever.
We've done a number of these interviews, and I've booked, as a producer, a number of these interviews with grieving families. And I'm not a psychiatrist, but there is a certain, I'm going to put this in quotes, a certain denial that I think that takes place when you're grieving. And it reminds me of a couple months back when we had the brother in studio of the man who was accused of causing that horrific fatal crash
at Tacoma Wesley.
Correct, thank you.
Yeah.
At Desert Inn and Durango that killed a family, 4 people.
And that was,
then we had him in studio, and you, Brian and JD, you handled it the exact same way as a grieving brother. But he made a lot of excuses. Oh, well, the video doesn't show it, and the cops haven't talked to us, and this and that. And, we were very skeptical of what he was saying. But I think none of us, thankfully, to my knowledge, are ever in that position where we're grieving. And I think there is what I've seen over and over again is there is a certain denial that happens when your loved one is killed. Especially in a high-profile manner.
Right, exactly. I think you have to factor that in when you have these interviews, and I believe Brian did that pretty well. But yeah, I asked the question: did this particular individual have a poor perception of police officers beforehand? I think she answered it. I believe that he did. I believe that if you're scared, if 2 police officers are talking very calmly and politely to you, and you still are scared under those circumstances, and as far as the part of if you do one thing this way, it could be taken as this if you reach for your glove box or you don't hand your ID the correct way. I mean that to me that's a bit of paranoia. But again, I am not I am not biracial, nor am I African American, nor have I been.
That's what I was going to say.
I knew you were going to. Nor have I been in a situation, but I have been in a chokehold. I have had a gun pulled on me. I have been treated poorly by police officers, but I was in a situation that I should not have been.
Okay, so the perception from white as a whole, the perception that white people have towards officers as compared to the overall perception that minorities have towards officers are very, very different. And there are a lot of different reasons for that.
But what I'm saying is that is not the police officer's fault.
I think in some instances it's the police officer's fault. I think Officer Chauvin is a perfect example of that. There are some officers out there that treat minorities different than white people. So I think there are some officers out there that absolutely should own up and take responsibility for their racism. Now, is it the majority of police officers? I don't think so. But again, the perception that white people have towards officers is very different than the overall perception that African Americans have towards
some of those officers that treat Caucasians differently than African Americans are African American themselves.
Well, I would also like to know exactly what took place with this specific officer, Garrett Rolfe, who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks, who had over 12 complaints. I want to know what those complaints are. Why is it when we hear about these police officers involved in shootings, it's never a clean slate? Rarely, anyway. Why is it that we always hear about complaints in a rap sheet? Chauvin is a perfect example of that. The guy had, close to 20 complaints? It's ridiculous.
I think he had 18 complaints.
I said, close to 20. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. So why is it when we hear about these officers and these officer-involved shootings that are made public, why do they never have a clean slate? If you want to talk about how we need to change the laws in this country, how many complaints does an officer need to have where you finally just say, okay, enough's enough, you're gone, you can't be a police officer anymore?
Three strikes, you're out, Brian.
My point being, there needs to be something put in place.
Which I totally agree with.
There's nothing
100%.
in place right now.
Yeah.
In any other job, you have that. Number to call, your reaction. We just spoke to the sister of the late Rayshard Brooks. It's a very emotional interview. It's very difficult to do. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on what Danielle Barbine just said, the sister to the late Rayshard Brooks? Do you agree? Do you disagree with her? Do you think that this officer should get life in prison? Now, we all know that's not going to happen no matter what he's charged with. But what do you think? Justice for the family. She said life in prison. She also said that his past, whether it's a criminal record or not, has nothing to do with this. She also went on to say a lot of other things that, you could agree or disagree with. She said her brother was scared. She said her brother was very kind. He didn't want to hurt anybody.